the cloud. There we go. Okay, so Sprint Application 5 is going to be a little different from the previous examples that you've built so far, right? We started off, built Travel Splash, which is the basic end-to-end application where a sales rep needs to request travel. We did Sprint 2, which is where we have a database that needs to be referenced to clean up some address data. Then we had Sprint 3, which showed us how to use a rule set and integrations. Then you guys recently just completed Sprint 4, which showed you how to manipulate a PDF file and attach all the necessary pieces of information from the employee applicant so that they can get the paperwork they need for their job. Sprint 5, it's a new hire request, but this application build is going to be half built for you. The reason why we decided to do that is because we wanted one build where you guys have to kind of fix what a customer has, let's say, half made. And so you're going to have a flow. You're going to be given a project that's going to have half the functionality, and even the functionality that has been built isn't built correctly. So it's going to be your guys' job to look at that messy flow, to look at the data and where it's flowing, and make the project work by fixing the current functionality that is there, or by building new functionality that needs to be there in order to get the new hire request to be what it should be for the sake of the deliverable of the requirements document. It's going to have the same layout. You're going to get a task list, and you're going to have a requirements document that you can read through and understand what is the main purpose and what is the goal of the features and things that are half built or that need to be built. So, yep, exactly, James. That's why we revamped this training, because we wanted to give people the experience of what the day in the life of a decisions developer would be like. So that's what it's going to be. Without further ado, any questions over that? Okay. Before we go into our classes, let's kind of talk about the expectation of this week. As many of all know, for the people on the side, this week is a holiday week. So Thursday is going to be the observance of Thanksgiving for those who are on the US side. And so, which involves a lot of the trainers here and some of our students as well. So what that means is both Thursday and Friday, we will not be having classes. There will be no sprint stand-up on Thursday and Friday. So what does that mean? So that means that your presentation for this project, you will be given, let me go back into my calendar so I can find where that is. So what that means is that the Sprint 5 application isn't due until a week from tomorrow, so November 30th. November 30th is when your project, your application has to be completed. So for a lot of our US trainers and also our US students, you'll have Thursday and Friday off from training. For those of you who are more international, you've just been given extra days to work on the project due to the United States holiday. So that's something to be aware of, that this project, when I give it to you guys, is due November 30th. So that's the last thing that we need to talk about, so you guys kind of know what the expectation of this week is. Any comments or questions? All right, I don't see any questions, so let's go ahead and I'll tell you what today is going to look like. So the first class we're going to start talking about is parent and child reporting. So I'm going to talk about that, show you guys how to set that up, and go through a slide that kind of details the different specifications that you will need to be aware of when you're trying to set that feature up. Second thing is going to be a troubleshooting class, where I'm just going to talk to you about some basic troubleshooting tips and tricks that we do in decisions. After that, we will be doing our sub-dialogues class, where I'm just going to talk about the sub-dialog form control, because that's a form control that you will be using in this application build. And then after that, we'll have lunch, and then you'll have your application build 5 requirements. So that's going to be the expectation of the rest of the day. Next thing we got to talk about, who here will be using the training servers? Perfect. So if you are going to be using the training servers, please keep your hands up so I can see that, or type it in the chat. Okay, perfect. Alrighty, Chris is, Shashadar is. And then James will be Deepak. Okay, so I think most everyone will be except for like John and Alfred. Or no, yeah, except for like John and Alfred. But okay, perfect. So with that, knowledge, I want you guys to send me your URL that you are using. So if you want to email that to me, or preferably email or Slack that to me, because for this project, what I'll need to do. So if your server is like training, what's someone's server? I think it was like training at decisions. Training to decisions. So if you're, let's say this is your URL, and it is trainingatdecisions.com/12. I want you guys to Slack me or email me this at jared@decisions.com, because for this project, I need to import the project for you guys, because there's a special way that I need to copy it so that you guys won't be interfering with each other's work. So send me that via the public Slack, a DM in the public Slack, or via my email address at jared@decisions.com, so I know which individuals I need to copy that project for, so you guys don't have to worry about that input. Does that make sense? Any questions over that? Clear? All right. All right, take 5 minutes and let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll begin our class. Perfect, love it, I love it. I'll give people 2 more minutes to send those things to me, and then we'll begin our actual lecture over parent and child reporting at 9:30. Alrighty. Thank you guys for slacking me. I got that, and during the break, I will be importing that project into your environment. So when you get the requirements document, those of you who are on the training servers, you don't have to, you will not have to import the project because I'll have already done that with you and I'll have your name on it. So you'll easily be able to identify that. So for example, if I put Chris Athenios' project, it's going to say, Chris Athenios, new hire request, sprint 5, and in a folder. So you guys will will be able to identify easily which one belongs to you. Okay, with all that out of the way, thank you for your patience for all of those items to talk about. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of why we're here today. Today is to talk about all the classes and skills you need for this Sprint application. One of those skills will be parent and child reporting. This shouldn't be something that's unfamiliar to a lot of us because we did have this set up in a previous sprint 3. So this should be review. We want to make sure that you have all the knowledge that you need for this project. So what is parent child reporting? It is basically a report design pattern or a report paradigm that allows a designer user or an end user to be able to see two pieces of data that are related. And if the end user clicks on a different parent record, then the associated child records will appear for that new clicked on record. So that's the power of parent and child reporting. You can easily see what are the related pieces of data that I have in regards to this data structure. So in the slide right here, you see that there is this policy application, or not policy application, but it's an insurance policy, and each policy, there's a policy holder with a number, and then if a user clicks on a policy number, you can see for that specific member the amount of a claim that's active for that particular user. So it's kind of a three-way relationship between three different tables where a user can see the different related pieces of data. What is this thing made of? It's made of two things. It's made up of the report send data filter change source, that you give it a filter change source name, and what that does is it places that ID or that related field that you've sent as the filter change source in the URL of your dashboard, so other users can find that particular or not other users, other page components can find that piece of data and then display the corresponding data with that. The next thing you want to do is with the child report is you want that filter to say, hey, I want you to get the filter criteria from that URL. And so that's what we expect, is that you can find that there on that child report. So it knows, hey, if I have a folder ID or a member ID that equals this, I need to filter myself out by this field with that value. So that's essentially what it is. What's the setup for it? The base setup for parent and child reporting to work is you have to have a designed, whether within decisions and established table relationship or a foreign key relationship that you have configured in your process, so that inherent in your data, there is this connection that connects the parent record with the child record. So that's the first thing you'd have to do. You have to make sure that, hey, I've configured these data types. They are related by this primary key inside this other table. Let's talk about the parent report setup. So after we've created the database tables that have those relationships, how do we go about setting this up in decisions? The first thing we need to do is we need to pick what is the field, the member that we will be choosing to be our send data filter change source, which in this case would be the primary key of that database table. So how we do that is on the screenshot here, you can see that we have the policy report, and the policy number is that unique identifier that represents a distinct policy. And so what we want to do is we want to send that data. So for example, this policy of 920924663, we want to send that as URL data in the dashboard. So what we do is we make sure we click on this data member, then we go all the way to the properties, and then we select send data as filter change source, and then we give it a name, any name. In this case, it made more sense to name it policy identifier, or PID for short, so that it could be something that's easy to remember. Because when we set this up in the child part of the relationship, we need to make sure that this is it is exactly matching, because it is case sensitive. If it's off by a little bit, then it won't make the connection. So that's this two-step part that we have to do for the report setup. What about the child report side? So we mentioned this a little bit. Let's talk about it in more detail. So for the child report setup, this is the policy member side. We need to make sure that we add a filter, and we add a filter for the related field between those two reports. So in the policy report, there was a policy ID, or a policy number. And in the policy member report, there is also a policy number. So what we want to do is we want to add a filter, and a policy number equals filter on that child report. And then we want to rename that filter name. So as you can see here, we select this filter, and then we go all the way over here. We need to change this filter name to, instead of policy number equals, we're going to remove that, and we're going to call it PID, because that's the filter change source name that we configured on the parent report. And so that's why we have to rename it, because then this report knows, oh, I get this data I filter by from, excuse me, from that URL variable field in that data structure, or in that report. Okay. Any comments or questions? All righty, let's continue on. Let's final part of it. How do we test this? You can't test this via the preview, because the preview just kind of shows you the layout of the report, and if your data is depending on another report running in order to filter out its data, it's not going to do that, because you can't preview two reports at the same time effectively. And since the data in the preview doesn't really place the data in the URL, that's why it would be difficult to test this. So in order to test it, you want to add both reports to a page, and you just want to create a dashboard with a page that has both those reports on it, because then you can easily identify, is this functionality working or if it's not. And how you test it is that you click on different parent records, and in those parent records, then you can see the child report change based on the different parent user selection. And so that's how that would work on that. All right, any final comments or questions over parent and child reporting? All right, let's go ahead and investigate my child report example. I actually have that parent and child report that we were talking about in the slides. So here we have the three different reports, right? I have a policy report, which contains all the different policies that I have. There's the policy type, there's the policy number, there's the primary holder of that policy, and all this information that we need to be aware of, right? So now, if I left click on this data member, I get access to all these policy member properties. And I can easily see, okay, this is the properties for this data field. Over here is the send filter change source. When I click on this, I'll get a text box. I will type in PID, place that there. And once I type in PID, this is all good. You don't need to change anything. And then you just save this report. Close this. Then the next thing is let's do the policy members. We want to find out the policy members associated for that report. So now notice I already have this filter here. I'm going to delete this so I can walk through the steps to do it. So this is the data that I have for this policy member report. These are their member IDs, and this is their associated policy numbers that they are associated with. So now what I need to do is I need to add a filter. The filter you're going to look for is going to be in entity filters. Excuse me, not entity filters, field filters. And you're going to scroll all the way down till you find the policy number, field policy number, folder, and then you're going to click on this plus sign here, and you're going to grab the policy number equals. Now, this will work on any type of filter, but the filtering that we want is we want all the records that are associated with that policy. Therefore, that's why we use the policy number equals. But I don't always have to use the equals filter. It could be used on any filter that I want. But in this case, I want it to equal that value so I can get all of the members that are associated with the corresponding policy. I'm going to change this to PID. Then what I want to do is I want to make sure that I say get values from other reports, because that's what's going to happen when I configure this. I want it to get its value from a report that's going to be found on the dashboard. So I need to make sure that I configure this. Once I do that, then I'm all done with my parent and child report. I can click save, and I can close this. And now I've already created a dashboard. So I think it's here. Yep. And now when I look at this dashboard, you can see how on this policy, there are 3 people in this policy. There's Clarence, there's Ruperto. I'm here. Now, if I click on a different one, notice now these records change. So now I have Oleg, Arabelle, Georgette in this policy for 765067789. I can do the same thing for this record and notice that it changes and so on and so forth. This dashboard also has filtering. So if I click on, so I have Arnaldo and we see all of the claim amounts for his claims. And if I click on a different user in that, then you'll see that I have another claim amount for Lou in here. And so this report viewer is also a child of this report here. And that's pretty much the settings to create it. It's not too complicated. You just have to make sure that your data has that type of relationship between them. And then if they do, then you can leverage that in decisions and create any different type of configuration that you're looking for in regards to displaying it. Good question. Chris asked, does it use the same PID between the report 2 and 3? So that one uses a different one. So let me go into that. So if I go back into my parent and child report, notice that on my policy member report, I have a filter. So it filters out the PID from the policy report. But this report also sends its own filter change data source, MID, so the member ID. And so what the third report picks up, Chris, is not the PID. It actually picks up the claim report. It actually picks up the member ID, MID. And so when I go to the dashboard, you can easily see those 3 variables that I have configured on the dashboard. See right here where I have MID and it's 587375860 and PID 920924663. So right here, you're getting to see the actual effects of the send filter change data source, that there's actually 2 going on. It's the PID and the MID. And so that's how we've gotten that to work. So so it won't work because I don't have a policy number in my data structure, in my claims report data structure. So let's take a look at this. So if I add fields, notice I don't have a policy number, right? There's no policy number field. So this data structure cannot use the PID or the policy number identifier because it doesn't have a policy number data field. The reason why it works with the policy member report is because the policy member has a policy number field. That's the related field that it has between the two. Let me go back to the slide. I think it had a really cool here. So this is the actual relationship. So the policy, the claim report does not have the policy number, but because policy number in the policy table is also in the policy member table and it's related by these two things, that's why I can use PID, policy identifier. Oops, I didn't mean to kill my screen share. Any other questions? Give me one moment, guys. All right, I'm back, guys. Okay, I don't see any questions. Actually, let me look at my chat. I don't think I saw that. Correct. Okay, I'll ask, can we encrypt the PID and mid in the URL? Can you encrypt that? That's actually a great question. Let's actually, let's go back into my local decisions and let's see what happens. I agree. Yeah, I was gonna have the same. That's my first knee-jerk reaction is what James said. I don't think you can, because if I did, I think we have to set that on the data structure level. So let's do this. I'm gonna take this question offline on, and I'll test that out locally during like a lunch or something. See, but I do think the answer is, I think James is correct. I don't think it will, because then it won't be able to know where to find that record. So yeah, but that's a good idea to try. Correct, Shashadar. So if the claim report had a policy identifier and I wanted to filter it out by the policy ID, then it would work. Alrighty, any final comments or questions? I think that's it for right now. Okay, cool. So let's do this. Let us take a 10-minute break, and I'll see you guys back at 10 a.m. So stay on the call. I'm just going to pause the recording. All right, so let's put the recording back on, and let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you. Share screen, screen 3, boom, and then I'm going to create a new folder. It's kind of like my YouTube channel. I always just create a new designer project folder for it. troubleshooting in decisions. I want to thank you guys for liking my YouTube channel too. I noticed a lot of you subscribe to it, so really appreciate it. And if you have any suggestions, let me know, because I don't mind trying to build those out. Okay, so troubleshooting in decisions. So when we do build something in decisions, we're going to have to troubleshoot it and confirm that it works, because sometimes we think we know what the process is doing, and in reality, we don't. So how do we troubleshoot our processes? Well, let's see, this is going to be example. I use a divide step, connect it up. And I'm just going to cause this one to, I'm going to have a value be divided by 0, which should error out, I think. Yes, it did. So when we do that, whenever you encounter an error in decisions, you can always tell that, hey, there's an exception that occurred because the step is highlighted red. And also you'll have this exception to be able to show the details of that exception. When you look at it, a lot of it can be hard to decipher because it's a lot of words and it's a lot of stuff thrown at you. But the best way to kind of look at it is typically you'll find the answer somewhere related in the middle of this exception stack trace details. So as you can see here, as I'm reading through it, I can see that, hey, this flow, which is the example flow, that's what this is. It tried to invoke the method, and which is a fancy word to say, try to run this step. And it threw an exception, and you can see it here. It says attempted to divide by 0. And so whenever you run through these details, you don't want to just immediately say, oh, hey, this error happened, let me just ignore it. You want to definitely look at it, find the text that is clear, and that's not a long string of namespaces for that method code, but kind of find that message here. That's kind of the bread and butter of kind of being a good troubleshooter, is knowing how to decipher and read these exception stack traces. Because many times you'll have a lot of issues where it's like, well, I don't know what the error is, it just doesn't work. Well, when you look at the exception details, you can find it and find what that error is. So this one identified it. I tried to divide it by 0. If I select it by 2, it should run, and it runs with no issue, and the output should be 5 now. So that's one of them. Okay. What about when we are in, I'm gonna go back to our old project. What about when we are in a configuration folder and the stuff that we need to troubleshoot? I don't think I have any I9s. Let me import some I9s so I can show you. I9 CSV. I'm gonna import this one, this one, this one, and this one, so I'll have 4 records. So let's say I have some issues with my I9 importing or some of my user action flows. How do I troubleshoot those to make sure that they're working? Because sometimes it will look like they're working because the action seemingly has run through, but when I actually do the process and view the document, I can see, hey, it didn't actually run or return the expected result or data I wanted. So let's say I had an issue with the assist with signing document, right? For some reason, it doesn't work, it doesn't run. Well, how could I test this? How could I test and make sure that the user action flow actually worked? Well, what I would do is I would go into my data types and go to my configuration folder, and I would go into my assist with signing document. Now notice this flow, when I go to my data explorer, already has the extension data of the I9 application because it is uniquely aware of this type. So how do I troubleshoot this? Well, if I want to troubleshoot to make sure just this flow works, I'm just going to debug. But notice I can't debug this because I need to provide a folder ID, right? Now there's no document to display. Let's say I fill this data out, right? And then I submit this. This process should error out, right? It errored out because I'm going to look at the details and let's see if I find out. So value cannot be null. So that's the error. Basically, it's saying it tried to delete a file, but it did not pass any information into it. So my process errored out. But is that a valid test? Did I accurately, validly test this process? Yes or no? Any guesses? Yes or no? Did I test this flow effectively? Exactly, no. What do I need to do if I wanted to test this with live data? What do I need to do? Where do I get that reference ID? There you go. Exactly. So if I want to test out my user action flows, and since the user action flows are looking for some type of object that of the data structure it's tied to, what I need to do is I need to go back to my report or my dashboard. Let's do all I9s. And then I can manage and I can get the ID of that particular record. Click done. And then I can go back to my data types configuration folder. And then I can debug that process with that folder ID, and it's going to pull in all the data it needs for the extension data and the entity, and I can debug this. And now you can see now I have this specific record. If I fill this out, and I say Jared Rodriguez, and then I say some street in America, a city in America, ST in USA, zip, numbers, whatever it is, right? And then I submit this. Now I can see my process fully execute. Now, here's another thing that is also good to practice to do. Just because I know it executes all the way to the end doesn't necessarily mean that it worked the way I want it to. So a habit to get into to actually understand what your process is doing is always look at the execution inputs and outputs. Then you can see, hey, this worked effectively because I can confirm it passed in this folder ID, and then it's outputting all the file references. And in this case, there's only one file reference. It's the Alex Ofen I9 PDF, as we can see with the file name. And then I can go into the form, view inputs and outputs of the form. So I can see the input document got successfully passed through. And then on the output of my data, I can see that I have the user signature correctly outputting. So I'm doing this because we want to make sure that each step in the process is actually behaving the way we want it to. And I can go to the next section and say, hey, let's look at this. So this is a signature PNG, and I'm passing in the file data or file name and the file type. And this looks like it's getting through. I can see the length of the file. So that's being outputted correctly because it's exactly the same as I'm inputting into it is what's coming out of it. And then I can look and continue to look at the PDFs and see if that data is being passed through into that PDF. So it's saying, hey, update this. And it looks like it's updating the PDF file because it's outputting that in this variable. And then so on and so forth. Getting the habit of going through each step and making sure that it actually performed it will make sure that you understand that your process worked the way it did. Because sometimes it may work, but it didn't get the correct result that we were expecting. So it'd be something that we'd call a logical error, right? It functioned, there was no syntax error, there was no something that caused the process to break, but there was an error because it didn't behave the way that we expected it to. So that's why I always get in the habit of looking at the view inputs and outputs between the different parts of the process so that we can confirm it's actually running through and actually getting us the information that we want. And then finally, all we have to do then is now let's just confirm. Let's view this document and let's see if all that information, and then we can see all that information got placed in what was needed here. So that's that. So that's how you debug your user actions, is make sure you pass in the ID of a particular record. so that you can say, hey, this is how I want this part of the process to work, and we can make sure that it works that way. All right, any comments or questions? Another important area of troubleshooting that you'll want to be aware of is also the system folder. The system folder contains a lot of key KPIs on what is going on within the system. So we already talked about error handling in previous classes where you can write your own log message. And specifically, it's going to be in the administration folder under system tools and under logging, where we can see the different areas. So we can see that, hey, we had a couple of errors with the system, folder not found. Let's see. I can see this error of this flow being executed. That was the session where I ran it and it didn't work. Let's see, I'm trying to find the divide one where I ran the divide step. I see this one, example is invalid when being executed. So this is the one where it talks about, hey, this is the flow that messed up and didn't run. So you'll have all the different abilities to be able to look at your logs and be able to determine which are the ones that need to be fixed and which ones are the ones that don't need to. There is also the event viewer, which is also very helpful in capturing the events that are happening within your system. So let's say if you have a lot of scheduled jobs running, you can easily look at the scheduled job log and to see what's running. Currently on my local, I don't have any scheduled jobs running. I don't have any pending jobs, so that's why my data is blank. But if you do have any configured scheduled jobs in your environment, and you want to make sure they're running, or if they're producing any piece of information, then you can make sure that they are running here. You can also look at your system activity too, with API calls, your thread jobs, flow starts or flow step runs, rule executions. So this contains that system activity as well. So if you need to troubleshoot if your rule is executing or how many rules you have executing your process, this can help you determine that. Another frequent one that I use a lot is the flow management. And I think, James, he actually used to be on the support team. I used to work with him on the support team many, many moons ago. And this was definitely a helpful part of our troubleshooting because we can easily see if there was a flow that kind of got lost and kept running and would slow down the system, because I can easily take this flow and see which flows are in the stored work list or which flows are still running, and I can decide to kill them or find them. To actually kill a running flow, I can actually look at it here. So as you can see here, I have two running flows currently, and these should be done. So what I'm going to do is I can just kill that. It's essentially, think of it as this is the task manager for decisions. So you have Windows Task Manager, and I can see all the performances for my computer and what's going on. This right here is literally the decisions task manager. I can right click, I can kill this process. If it's just kind of in the ether and it needs to be destroyed, I can do that. I can view any stored workflows, so any workflows that are stored, which means if your process runs and it hits an assignment or a task, your workflow gets stored into a database table so that decisions can easily reference it. So if you have a lot of these, and this is like clogging up your process, you can be able to see which flows are stored, and you can clear them out to kind of clear space in your system. So this is another important area to be aware of and to clear out. Other than that, that's basically it. Any other comments or questions? Ooh, good one. Yes, the profiler. Profile is also good too. So let's see, let me go back to my decisions instance. So if you want to use the profiler, you can definitely go into, I think, click on profile here, and you can capture metrics on different speeds and what's going on within your decisions instance. So let's say if there's an API call or a database call that I want to test to see how it's running, I can start a new profiler session. I can call this, let's say, Jared test profile session. And then I can click OK, and then it will filter out and show me and start a new session and remove all the previous information and just start off with a fresh one. After I've configured, let's see, let me just click around a few things and run some flows. I want to run, there we go, I'll run this one. Flow ended. All right, now if I go to profiler, I should be able to see where let's say folder entities run. I can see a database call. So that one ran a database call. Yeah, right here, perfect. So I ran a database call on that flow. And so it's showing you, here's the data here. Here's how many with children, of how many processes it executed. And let's see if I do the service boundary call, I can see, so count of 77 type of events that happened. And I can look at this in detail and find out the speed and all that stuff here. If I want to stop profiling, I can say save profile data first, and then it will save it. And then I can easily download the profile data in an XML or in any type of format that you so choose. So let's edit this in Notepad, and I can see that. I think there's also another way. Let's kind of test this. I think there's another way. Let's see. Save data profile first. I'm gonna refresh this, and without saving, let me refresh my screen. Test 2. This is a clear loaded session from file, so I can take some from file. So that's that text view. Okay, so there's the way I was looking for. So here it gives you a better view of, here's the data that ran, the trace data. Here is the database query that was run against the document storage. And I can see the total count, total time. So it was either that fast where it didn't capture anything for it because it was in the milliseconds. And then I can view this and display it somewhere else. That's basically that one. There's also the profile view summarized, which I believe it just kind of organizes it and types it in more neatly than just the raw profile view. But database calls, this will show you the database calls that are being sent through. But yeah. Any other questions? Alrighty. I don't see any more questions. Let's roll right on into our next class, advanced form controls. All right, advanced form controls. So in this application build, you guys will be using a sub dialog. And not to toot my own horn, but I actually do have a sub dialog YouTube video on my YouTube channel. All courtesy thanks to, I think, Ala, who asked for it. So I put that on there. So let me link you guys to that video. So if you want something more on decision sub dialog flows because you want to understand them and know how they work, here is a video that I have created that would be good supplemental material to watch and review to understand how they work. And they're pretty helpful. They're pretty useful features in decisions, especially if you want to extend the user's form process. So we'll get to that in this slide presentation, and I'll also create one for you guys so you can see it. All right, so what's the objectives? So the objectives are twofold. We're going to talk about data repeaters, and we're going to talk about sub-dialogues. Sub-dialogues and data repeaters are ways to extend a user's form experience within the process. So how do we do that? Well, what the data repeater is good for is it is what we call a list control, meaning that it takes in a list of data. So you can say, hey, I want to display the list in type, a list of data, a complex type, in a format that's just a mini form on top of another form. And so this is helpful because you can have further design capabilities on these forms, because you can put things like text boxes, drop-down lists, check boxes, and any types of form controls on that, because you're just leveraging the form designer as a mini form on top of a parent form. Another thing that you can do with that too is, since a data repeater is just a mini form, you can leverage things like active form flows. So if you want to have a dynamic a dynamic data repeater experience, where if a user clicks on a checkbox and you want it to hide and show certain controls, or you want certain controls to be disabled or enabled based on the data within that specific line, you can do that. I also have a YouTube video on data repeaters on my channel. And so if you want to watch that, I actually show how to do that. And you can make a dynamic form experience for that. So it's really, really cool. A thing to remember, though, with data repeaters is data repeaters only work with composite types, meaning it's not going to work with a string or a int type. You have to be mapping in a complex type. So a type like the accounts type, or a user-defined type like a new hire request or a travel request. And then each of the data names for that form control will be tied to that complex type. So that's the thing that you'll need to be aware of, is that the repeater control repeats a single complex type item and can only be used with complex types. Comments or questions? Alrighty, let's talk about sub-dialogues. So a sub-dialogue is similar to a data flow, but the main purpose of a sub-dialogue flow over a data flow is the data flow cannot have forms in it, but a sub-dialogue can have forms. So that's what we mean by the sub-dialogue is used to extend the user's form experience in the product, because forms can be used within sub-dialogues. If you actually try to do this in a data flow or an active form flow, that flow will actually throw an error saying there cannot be any asynchronous steps within that flow. So that's why if you do want to use forms and you want to add them into your process, you will need to use a sub-dialog flow. And a sub-dialog flow, what it allows you to do is you can change data or push data that's from the parent form, or from the sub-dialog form to the parent. So if you want to add in like some data and say, like, for example, how you will use it in your project is you're going to have a sub-dialog flow that's going to be triggered by a button click, and then it's going to display a form that allows you to add the hardware that's needed for the new hire. And so you should be able to add as many pieces of information of that new hire on that request. And then once you're done with that sub dialog, then when you click done, it should show you all the new hire hardware items that you're requesting for that new hire within that main parent form. And so that's how you are going to use it in your project for that person to display user information and also to manipulate data on the parent form. Alrighty. Any questions over subdialogues? All right, let's play around. Let's test some subdialogue. So I'm going to create a subdialogue. I'm going to create a form first. This is going to be an example form. Example form K, form. And what we're going to do for this is, let's say, it's going to be a very simple example, but let's say I'm just going to have a button, and the step I want to use is the subdialogue. And I can have a subdialogue button. I can put this, I'll put this here. And I'm just going to call this run new form. And let's say there is a text box, or let's say it's a number box. This one's going to be data, number data. And I'm actually going to have this set to be disabled. So is editable? No, it's not editable. Behavior, is it enabled? No, it's not enabled, which that is the same thing. But anyway, so I have a disabled number box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form that's going to allow me to update that value. So what do I do? I'm on my run new form, or I'm gonna call this actually add number data to number box. Now there's two ways that you can do this. There are two types. You can use legacy, or you can use the sub-dialog rule flow. The legacy, it allows you to use the decisions 6-way. So if I do this, I can create a new flow. I create a sub-dialog data flow. And what I need to do is then if I declare any inputs and outputs, I need to match that to the data coming in and the data coming out. So this is, let's do this. This is going to be sub dialog data flow colon or parentheses old way, right? And so what I'd have to do is I'm going to create another form. Notice I have two paths. I don't have to connect something to the cancel path. You can, it's optional. The primary path you need to connect to is the change data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, let's show form. And I'm going to say, create new form, add number. And so this one's just going to have a button. I'm going to put 2 buttons so we have the cancel path, but again, you don't have to. Cancel. I'm going to call this change data, and the number spinner. Let's put that there. Number spinner. And so I'll give myself the ability and say this is my number. That's going to be the data. Perfect. All right. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to take in some data. Now, since I'm using a sub-dialog flow, and remember, I want to update the value that's on the parent form that's going to be running, that's going to have this sub-dialog button. So what I need to do is I need to take in a number. So it's going to be decimal, and I'll call this number data, or whatever it is. I forgot what I called it, number data, right? So I'm going to take in that input, and then what I want to do is on the change data, I want to output that number data, because whatever this outputs as, I want to make sure that this number data, let's see, changes the value or takes in the initial number. And then I also want it to change value of that number data. So what's happening here, fine, let me fix this. Behavior. It doesn't like it that it's a double. Rename, let's do it this way. So select from flow. I'm just gonna say we're gonna use my number. We'll do it that way. There we go. Okay. So now what's gonna happen is I'm gonna take it a number called number data, and then I'm going to output that number data with the my number that gets outputted from the form. And we can confirm this by looking at the data explorer, and we can see that it's going out and in to those respective locations. Now, when I save this, notice what happens in the previous form designer. I have two inputs. I have flow data inputs for the input of that flow, and I also have the flow number data decimal, which is the output. So what do I need to do to connect this number to this number? I need to hover my mouse over that input where I get the pencil. And when I do that, I want to switch the input type to component. So when I switch the input type to component, I can select the number data name, and I will just select that. So now the input has been correctly configured to say, hey, what I want to do is I want to place this number data, which is this variable right here. I want to pass that as an input to this subdialog legacy flow. And I can do the same thing, but what I want to do is I want to output that data into that number data variable. So in the form data name, I'm going to remove the flow colon. I'm going to actually make sure I copy this data name from this control. I'm going to left click this button. I'm going to click on the pencil, highlight this form data row, and I'm going to control V and paste that. Another thing I'm going to do is I also want to refresh, make sure I click this, refresh all components listening to this data name. What does that do? What that does is it makes sure that if I update the value in number data, it will refresh that number, that value within that variable. So that's why we do that. So I'm going to close this. And then what I'm going to do is let's add example form K into a flow. So we create flow. This is the run me flow, run me flow. I'm going to do show form, create form, existing, recent, example form, put the button here, put it here. Perfect. And then now what I'm going to do is let's debug. Let's see what happens. So now this is 0. I'm going to add a number to it. I'm going to put it to 1, change data. It went up to 1. I put here, I'm going to make this 10 or 9, change data. Now it's 9. Another thing you could do, going back to the troubleshooting aspect, is I can easily see the subdialog flow execute and see the path it went over by viewing that flow here. So I can see that what happens is on the first one, 0 came in, my number is now 1. So now I'd outputted that. But now when I click on this execution, I can say, hey, my number was 1, now it's going to be 9. And so that's how we configure that subdialog flow via the old way. All right, now let's do something else. Let us do, let's change, do you want to change the date? Let's change the date, date picker. All right, so this is going to be date. I'll put this right here. And we're going to set this behavior to maybe not be initially enabled, so this could be disabled. And let's make sure this is optional. Optional. Okay, perfect. I'm going to drag another subdialog flow. This time we're not going to use the legacy way. We're going to use the new way. So when I click here, I'm going to uncheck use legacy. And I'm going to say, let's use the edit sub dialog rule flow. And so what the rule flow does is it uses the version 7 active form flow behavior for sub dialogs. So now when I use my show form, I'm going to create a new form and say, let's say this is pick a new date, right? That's what I'm going to do. And we shall have a date picker. And then it's going to be new date. And we're going to add a button over here. I'll click save. Now, because I'm using the V7 flows, you will know that I can use, there's two ways you can do this. You can go all the way down to the form rules, and you can grab the set control value. And when you connect this up, I can say, hey, I want to select from flow. I want to grab my form data. And for my date picker, I want to set the value, or I'm just going to pick this control. And then I can say for the value, I want the new date. So now this flow will run and it will update that new date and place it on that parent form. So let's go ahead and debug this flow and do that, right? So I'm going to set this one up. I'm going to select December 1st button. Notice December 1st got updated. And we can see that it ran through that sub dialog flow and it did it that way. That's a way to do it. The way that I do it, and there's really, this is a right way to do it, but there's another way you can do it that I like that involves less steps. So if I go to the rule flow and let's say I'm just going to delete this, what I can do is I can say, hey, for the new date, I want to always select from flow. I want to pull form data. I want to use the date picker and grab the value and then done. And then on the output, what I want to do is instead of it set to rename, I'm actually going to say, hey, I want to go to form data. I want to go to the date picker on that form data, and I want to change value for the value. I like doing it that way because it's just less steps. So now when I run this, debug, it should do the same thing. So no date. Now I'm going to pick December 3rd, put this here, December 3rd. So both ways work. It all depends on how you want to use it and what makes more sense to you. If you want to use the set control value, by all means. I like using just the input and output mapping editor to update the values because it's just less steps and the flow is a lot cleaner. But right now, what I'm talking about, it purely comes down to preference. It's not there's no technical debt that you're incurring by choosing one or the other. But that's my way. Any questions over sub-dialogues, whether using the legacy or the sub-dialog rule flow way? All right, I see no questions. So let me make sure. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to review that application, the requirements document and the task list. But before I do that, I want to make sure that it is in there. Class. All right, perfect. So all the information that you will need for this project will be located here. You'll have the requirements document. You'll have the new hire application zip project folder, and then you also have the Sprint 5 task list. Now, I do want to reiterate, those of you who are on the training servers, you do not need to import the project because I will be doing that for you because I have to copy it a certain way. For people using your local instances, you will be able to download the new hire application here and have access to all that information, and you will have to do the import yourself. So that's the thing. But this is where you find all the deliverables for that project. Now, with that being said, let's kind of go through and let's kind of talk about the application and just kind of do a cursory overview of it. So what is the goal and purpose of this? Well, the goal and purpose of this is that we have a new hire process that was built out by a third party. And there's some functionality built out, but there's still some functionality that needs to be developed according to best practices and also separated into its different flows so that it observes decisions best practices. The scope of it is the project is to clean up and validate that there are no issues within the current process. In addition, we have to add the hardware request process into the current new hire process. This new function will be able to send out tasks to HR and IT departments at the same time upon approval of a manager approval. So there's two things within that scope that we can pull from. The first thing is, right, we need to add a new process, a new hire request process. And then the other thing we need to build is we also need to build a way where we have HR and IT get sent approvals that happen in parallel at the same time after the approval of a manager. So that's the thing that we need to be aware of. The 4 deliverables, that's how you know that you have completed everything and that you have everything built, is if you've validated and cleaned up the current new hire process, because remember, this is half built. You add the hardware request in the new hire process. You've created parallel tasks for account creation and the hardware request process. And then you've added the default error handling to the current process. So that's what's expected. For the new hire request validation, so it says in this process, you'll read this. This will give you the kind of step-by-step for how do we validate this new hire process. So one, we need to clean up logic in the flow following best practices. So what that means is a lot of this part of what you're building is you're not really building anything. You're moving steps around to make sure that it's not a ginormous, rat's nest. That's the whole point of this first part. And then you need to find out that the account creation is currently not creating accounts within the decision instance. We need to validate why it's not working and make the necessary changes, and then add the user to the correct group. So we have a couple things that need to be built here. The account creation is not working. We need to find out why it's not working. And then we need to make those changes and then make sure that we add them to the correct group. And then here we know that on the form, the department on that form that you will get when you start messing around and running with the process will be the user group of the account that needs to be added. Second part of the process, clean and make the flows nice and readable, straight lines. Make sure the flows are organized from left to right and top to bottom. So we don't want any other design or any other crazy setup. We just want it to be left to right and top to bottom. And also there's a couple of functionality here that says we need to split things into multiple subflows. So we have approval functionality should be moved to a trigger flow. The routing and HR task should be moved to the account creation state, and notification emails should be moved to a completed and rejected state. So the thing that I can infer from this, because it said trigger flow, is that the data structure we'll be using is a case entity. So if we have one ginormous massive flow, then what we need to do is we need to chop that flow up into subflows and then put that into a trigger flow, and we change the states of it to run, because that's what a case entity does. And so that's how I'm inferring that this is expecting a case entity. Alrighty, I won't read through all of this. The last one that I'll go through with you guys is here is the hardware sub dialog. So this is where you're going to implement that sub dialog technique in decisions and allow users to have a total hardware cost, add remove buttons for the data repeater, since that will also be a thing that you'll need. And then you'll have the form rules to disable the total cost. Here are the outcomes, submit and cancel, and then the HR will approve that request. All the mockups, you'll reference the mockups as you're building out the different dialog forms. and the forms for it. So that's will be your kind of your guiding light for the entire process. And then also your email template. Alrighty, any comments or questions over this new build? Seems like it's clear as mud, right? Not too difficult. I think you guys got it. All of that's in the, all of that is in the, I don't know. Let's see, where's my LMS? It's just new hire application. All of that stuff is in the LMS. But remember, Severin, you're on a training server, so you don't have to import that project. I will import that project for you, and it will have your name on it. So you'll be able to find out, okay, this is the one that you'll be using. Only if you are on a local install of decisions will you be importing this yourself. Alrighty, I see no more questions. So that completes the teaching for today's project. Let me go ahead and give you guys the tasks that I want you to work on. So let's go into share my screen. I'm actually going to do screen 2 for right now. And let's go into, not that one. Where's the tab? Oh, that's right. I moved it to the other screen. So for the task list, there's actually not too much. So what I want you to do is let's do task 1.1.1 all the way to this one, 1.1.6. So I want to put that in the public Slack channel for the October dev. At here, sprint 5 tasks to work on today. 1.1.1 all the way to 1.1.6. I'll also post that in the Zoom chat if you guys want that as well. So that's going to be the task list for today. So here's the plan of action. Since it's going to take me some time to import people's, for those of you on a training server, it's going to take me some time to import those projects into those respective servers. So what I want you guys to do is take like an hour. You can either read through the document, which would I advise, or let me word it this way. You have two options. You can either take an early lunch, go get some food, do whatever you want in that, or read over the requirements document thoroughly, like it's a book. Just read it all the way from start to finish a couple of times so that you know what to expect from it. After you do that, read the task list from top to bottom and make sure you understand what's expected from that. So do that so that you can do one, you're going to do both of those things. You're going to either take a lunch and then you'll read through it, or you just kind of read through it and you can Slack me if and to check if I'm done with your import. But that's kind of the expectation. So take a lunch or read through the document, and you're gonna have to read through the document anyway, so you can choose which one you want to do. But the task list for today is 1.1.1 through 1.1.6. So that's after you get to the import already in your environment, those are the tasks you work on. Any comments or questions? I don't understand the question, Alfred. We need to go back to what or start a dev time? So currently we already talked about all the classes. So all of this, and we already did the application build requirements. So it's just dev time. Nope, we already finished all the lessons. So after this, there is no lessons. It's just reading over the requirements and build time. Okie dokie. All right, training server people, give me about an hour to upload all your projects and make sure that it's all in there. And after that, you can go ahead and start building, ask questions in Slack if you need assistance or need help understanding a requirement. All right, take care, everyone.